Welcome to the Magnificence of the Three, where we level up to remember who we are, why we are here, and how to do it better. My name is Jason Ford, and I'm here with my brother from another time out, Tumua. Today we got a great episode. We're going to wrap up with the story of Time Out actually getting released from prison and talk a little bit about how he adjusted to life, and then we're going to go into more content of his book, The Magnificence of the Three, which is a award-winning book, and go into some of the topics as far as the land and his interpretation on how the number three comes back into this biblical story and how we can expand on that. What we ask, though, going into this is that you keep an open mind. This is not pushing an agenda. Everybody's on their own journey here. Our particular journey, two guys from totally different lives, and we met coincidentally, if we want to call it coincidentally. I think it was divine intervention, but we were put together. Both of us wanted to do a podcast. Both of us happen to be authors, and here we are, Time Out. So I know you like to take us out in a quick prayer, so let's go ahead and do that, buddy, and we'll get started.
Thank you. Good morning. Let's say a short prayer. Bless our morning with Father in heaven. Thank you for this beautiful morning. Thank you for adding another day to our lives. Thank you for blessings giving us, our families, our loved ones, and our friends, and the country as a whole, and the world as well. Thank you again for everything that you've done for us. We ask for your spirit to be here with us today as we come out with another task, perform our task and our job that we are assigned to do. So thank you. We ask for your spirit to be with us today. Thank you again for all the blessings you give us. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. All right, Time Out. Let's go ahead and so the last episode we had talked about how you were doing time here in California and how you were in solitary. You became discipline free. You ended up finally getting your freedom and getting out into the free world and wrote a book. But I wanted to talk a little bit, and I'm going to learn something here because you and I haven't talked about this yet, which is the day of your release and then the adjustments coming into society. And if you're new to the podcast, you want to go back, it's all chronological order. We go through kind of how Time Out and I met, and then how Time Out came over from the islands, ended up in prison here in the States for 27 years, ends up getting out, writing a book. Him and I meet. We're doing the podcast. Here we are right now. But let's talk a little bit about that first day that you get out. What was that day like? Just knowing that after 27 years, you're coming out into a totally different world, not knowing what to expect.
Oh, when they say that word surreal, when people use that word, that's exactly, how I felt that day. That's how my day that day was defined for me. Surreal. It was, you dream of these things, you never expected it to come, and then it happened. And it was also a bunch of drama when I got out. But anyways, I remember coming home, driving home, and I'm looking around, and this is a whole, like, my brain in the minute there, you got confused, because this is not the environment you use it to for all these years. Your brain was not, you have to readjust your brain, to accommodate this new environment you're walking into. And that's how I felt that day, And I think I'm a lot more blessed than most people because all this time my wife and my family stay with me, keep in contact, come visit me. Everywhere I go, my wife will follow the kids and come visit me. So I was able to maintain that constant contact with family, So that's a little bit, I'm a lot more blessed because very, very few percentage of prisoners have that wide. Most of the time, once you get a life sentence, most prisoners, they lose their families. The women move on, the wives move on with the kids, but not for me. So that's how blessed I was. So a lot more easier adjustment compared to most people. But that day was I can still see the streets. I can still see the freeway as
Where did you get released from? What was the final stint?
I was in a place called little city here called Blythe.
Blythe, yeah.
Yeah. And I was there in the level 2 there. That's where I got released from.
And coming in out of Blythe, when you're first driving out of there, that's not even close to the real world in most cases, because Blythe is kind of a different place in itself. So when did you hit, what city did you hit first, like major city?
We stopped off at, where they had that casino. They had a casino there.
In Palm Springs area?
No, before Palm Springs. What's the name of the casino? We stop off over there. My wife said, "Hey, come get something to eat." So get some snack from the car. So we went outside, and that's that's one of the funny moments. So I walk into this place, this little is like a store, and he have all this stuff laid out, all the vegetables. I haven't had an orange at that time for like over a year.
And if you did, you were before when you were doing time, you were probably making pruno
And
with
that's why
it.
they took the oranges. They took the oranges from the whole system
Yeah.
because of that. So I walked into this place and you have all the fruits, the candy bars, the sodas, they're all sitting there. I was so confused. I didn't buy any. I ended up walking out of the place. Didn't buy it. My wife goes, "Would you get anything?" I say, "No, I'm okay."
That's so typical. That's a typical prison movie right there, where the guy gets out and has no idea
I
where to
know.
even start.
I don't
It's like
even know
going
where
to
to start.
Disneyland for the
Yeah.
first time, going, I have no idea
I had
which
no
ride to
idea
go on.
where. So I walked out. I'm like, my wife goes, "Did you get anything?" So, "Oh no, I'm fine." I'm looking at oranges. I'm like, man, I want an orange. That's one of the stories too. Like, I was actually in my first time in the level 2. I went out. They took me out of the hospital. So I went out of the hospital, and and this is my first time outside the gate, besides getting on a bus. So this is my first time out to the streets, in handcuffs. So we got out of the van, and we walk, and I was so shocked. I actually cried because this is the first time I walked under a tree like a full-grown tree. We're walking into the building, and I'm walking under it. There's rose bushes.
Because there's no trees on the yard.
There's no tree. The only tree you see is when you get on a bus, you see a tree. But my God, like little things we take for granted. And that's what I felt that day. Like little things, I forgot what a tree. We're walking in, under the trees, touching a rose bush. I forgot what those things feel like.
So
But
now you got you. I mean, that's not only the environment, which has to be crazy, but then you're going to have to deal with people in general. You're going to have to learn how to acclimate back to whatever family life that and how to go about that.
Oh.
And then the workplace. So you've got, I mean, you've got a whole nother journey ahead of you. What about the cell phone? I mean, you weren't used to cell phones at this point, obviously.
Nope.
How did that impact you?
Oh, it took me a long time to get that thing here. I had to learn. I try to learn all these little things by myself. That take even longer. But it's amazing. I gotta give everybody criticizes what's his name on Facebook that owns Facebook and Messenger.
Zuckerberg?
Yeah, everybody criticizes him, but man, I love that guy, and the reason why because on Messenger, this enables me to call my families from the islands of New Zealand, Australia, all over the place, and it's free. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
pretty
free.
much, you had your whole worldwide system right
Yeah,
there
that's a whole.
in your hand after being. How often could you use the phone when you were in there?
You can use it every night, but most of the time,
For like how long? 5 minutes?
15 minutes.
Yeah.
You can use it every day. It depends on the list because they make a list of people to use your time, use the phone, and
Who did
some-
you talk to besides your wife?
uh, oh, it's just generally family out here. Yeah, it's generally family. It was I didn't have no outside. I have a few friends, but nobody really come in contact that often. Once in a while, it's drop a dime, but it's mostly my wife and the kids.
So you're in a whole new world with, I mean, I can't imagine just walking out, people dressed totally different. There's no pay phones on the side of the road. The cars, the models of cars. Now you'd seen TV though, right?
Yeah.
So was there, I mean, the blending of what you saw on TV versus the real world, explain that. Did that help? Or was it, when you got out, a total different perspective of what you had seen on TV?
Oh, it's a world of true life. You don't see homeless on TV for one thing. So you don't see the drug addicts, how bad drug addiction is out here in the street until you get out. So, but we were warned. We attended classes in preparation for this for the release.
Oh, you actually had like an orientation to get.
Yeah,
to
we
get
have
out?
we have psychologists and
I'm kind of
psychiatrists.
surprised.
Yeah, the preparation for they have programs set up for people, especially for lifers. Just in case you get released, you have all these things, all these programs that prepare you to interact with society, and they have some really good programs. So, but they still don't prepare you enough. So the first day I got out, my wife took me to Walmart. And people have warned me. You say, hey, you got to be careful because people out there, they don't care. They don't care whether you kill 20 people or 100 people. They don't care. And so, there's that perception with inmates that everybody, I'm a killer. Nobody, you don't mess with me. And
You're like, nobody's going to know when you get out who you are,
who
and
you
nor do
are.
they care.
Yeah, nor do they care.
Did you find that you were actually probably more orderly and structured than the average civilian? Meaning you kind of stayed in your own lane?
That's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
I was a lot more structured because now, for one thing, I already got a plan. The plan is to write this book. So this thing is foremost in my mind. Say I cannot jeopardize it. It's just like I did. The preparation started from in there where I can't jeopardize this goal I've already set. I cannot do anything to jeopardize this goal. So that makes it easier. So the first day we got out, my wife took me to Walmart, and it's a busy store, so people will step on your toes. And that's exactly what happens. A lady stepped on my shoe and just kept walking.
Literally?
Literally. So I started laughing. I told my wife, I said, man, they warned me, but I'm glad they warned me. Anyways, but that's true to fact life right there. That's what it's like. People don't care. In prison you don't do that. You quick to apologize. Otherwise somebody's gonna put a knife in you. But out here, people don't care.
Well, and if you didn't hear the last episode, you were talking about how you did 12 years disciplinary free. That had to have been really good prep work for the discipline. And because getting out, if you were still doing the same things you were doing when you got in for the first couple decades, you probably would have snapped on somebody, just knowing that that's just the way you handle things.
That's a fact.
Yeah,
that's a fact.
So what about going back and getting a job? What was that like?
Oh, that was even harder because now, at the time, there are only few companies will ignore the fact that you were incarcerated. It's mandatory for you to put that down, and so it's a lot more harder. So I had to go through temporary agencies, employment agencies. I had to go through them, and that's even more worse because now. Most of the time, when I first got out, I was just doing general labor. I wanted to go to school, but the problem was if I go to school, then it distracted me from the project that I want to start, writing a book. So I ended up doing general labor. So you had to do no thinking. You just use your body for stuff. And then I ended up working with a lot of general labor, the average riffraff, the kids. And that's those guys. I mean, those kids. I'm like, I can't work with these people, man. I'm gonna end up doing something. These are scrubs, man. They don't.
You're basically back in the same environment, but they're not locked up.
Yeah. They're pretty much doing most of the
manual
work.
labor. Yeah.
You're doing most of the work. And these kids, you will find every way to avoid doing the work they play. So that's a stress.
And you probably worked your ass off too.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I did. And then. But that's one of the worst thing about employment is that's why I encountered a lot of racism, in the employment. It's not it wasn't the whites that's doing the racism. It's actually the colored people doing the racist stuff to you. So you have to have your own people, in place where they run the employment. That's one of the things that I learned. You have to have your own people, otherwise you can be stuck in the bottom. These people will move people up their own racial group ahead of you. So I learned that's one of the things I learned in the job employment when I first got out.
Well, that was one of the whole points of you and I doing this podcast. Not only talk about our different experiences and how we might be able to help people integrate more and do life better, have some sort of an archetype for life, but the separation. Even within, like you said, the cultural and racist divides, it's amazing. Like you get out and you're saying you don't even really experience white people as racism, but there was races going against each other.
Right.
Minorities going against each other, and that's where we're at. So that's why I want to make sure it's very clear as we go through this material, is we're not saying any of this is right or wrong. It's a different perspective. It's a different perspective that you've come up with, and I think it was a divine intervention. However, you go through and write this book being fairly uneducated, just reading a lot in prison, and you just knew you wanted to write a book about God, and all these things started coming through you and the magnificence of the three, because within the Bible it seems like God God does things in threes. And I actually started reading a book this morning. I can't remember the title of it, but it's a real short read. And somebody had recommended it. And the foreword, the author says that he had a hard time coming up with a title for the book because he didn't know how to leave God out of the title. And that's pretty sad because he's like, well, as soon as I say God, it's going to turn off so many people, but this is an important message. So I had to change the title. It's Infinite something. I can't remember what it was. However, it's sad that we've come to that point where I was thinking about this too. Did you have to learn the Pledge of Allegiance when you went for citizenship or anything?
No.
Okay, so I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We don't seem to see that at all in society right now. So this is the reason I bring that up is this is a lead in to what you're talking about, which is you're going to talk about a little bit about what you see in the Declaration of Independence. You're going to talk about the land of the promised land, in your opinion, your interpretation versus Israel. Okay. Right. So don't get turned off if you have no knowledge of the Bible. I'm not a biblical scholar by any means, but some of this is interesting because of what's going on currently in the Middle East. And this just vengeance. I'm going to attack you, then you're going to attack me. It's just vengeance. It's back and forth. And we know that fighting fire with fire is basically insanity. And so you have some theories by going through the Bible on where the promised land lies based on your research and your interpretations. So anything else you wanted to add, though, before we go into that with coming out and adjusting to society before you wrote the book? Or do you want to talk on writing the book at all before we get going? Because there's probably new people watching.
Yeah, one of the things that I found out when I got out, I didn't fully understand it until I was writing the book and reading up on neurological studies and discoveries. What I found out was that one of the things that was missing, I had problems with directions, like going places, I get lost. So I've always had, and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, man, I gotta be one stupid. I couldn't figure it out. But then as I was writing the book, I started reading up more about neurological, about how the nerve, your brain cells work. And that's when I realized that, when you don't constantly let's say perform a task like a habit, like going places, there's a neuron for that task alone. And if you don't use it, that's what the brain does, is remove the neuron from your brain, the connections from of the neuron from your brain. So when I was because I was just stuck in prison, I wasn't going anywhere but going from cell to cell. That neuron connections to that neuron was pruned out. That's why when I got out, I couldn't figure out directions. I couldn't figure out north and south yet. Even when I'm using maps, I couldn't. And then I finally figured out, that's what I got to regrow these connections. So now I'm better at it. And that's because the connections to these brain cells has already been replanted, regrow, and it's now growing. It's growing stronger because I'm constantly using this cell.
Well, that makes sense because you basically had a map ingrained in your head of the same walk much every single day. And then at one point you were doing 23-hour lockdown, right?
Yep. A lot of times that was that. So that brain cell. So what I'm saying is important that you establish good habit, a habit that you want to use for survival purpose. You want to strengthen it. You want to do perform that task every day when you get a chance, because it strengthens its connections, and that stays in your brain for you. So that's one of the lessons that's out of the book. My understanding of how the brain cell, which by the way is called, this is what God referred to as the tree of knowledge, is the brain cell. So, but that's one of the things that I had problems with when I got out. Just to link it to the book.
So, tree of knowledge, as you're claiming in the book, is essentially development of the brain.
The tree of knowledge is a brain cell. God did it so beautiful. What He did, it was made simple. He designed the brain cell to look just like a tree. It has roots. It has a tree trunk. It has branches. It looked just like a tree. And I found the key was the neurologist, biologist, neurologist guy, team out of Israel, Tel Aviv, made the connection between knowledge and emotions. And that's the key to finding, unlock the key that led me to the identity of the tree of knowledge is a brain cell.
You know what I thought was kind of interesting too, because I've been researching some of this stuff on the side since you and I've been talking, and the cranial nerves. You know how many of those are? 12. 12 disciples, 12 cranial nerves.
Ooh, nice,
So a
nice.
lot of this stuff starts tying together. It's like, and I've had people say, and it's true. I mean, you can go looking for things and numbers, just like if you go out on the road and you're looking for red Tesla cars all day, you're going to see red Teslas. However, there's a lot of coincidence in here, if that's what it is,
Right.
with the number threes, 7, 12, 9. But yeah, 12 disciples and 12 cranial nerves.
Yep.
So go ahead and expand more on the tree of knowledge then.
Well, the conversation in the Garden of Eden between the snake and the Eve, we call it the fall of man. But all I'm saying is that what God did was planted the evidence, planted a marker of what the brain cell is and how it's supposed to work. So what God did was design the brain cell to look just like a tree, and there's trillions of them in your brain. So with that trillion, all hooked up together, connected to each other, it looks just like a forest. So much so that neurologists call the brain as a neuron forest. And that's what I'm referring to, that the Garden of Eden is the human brain. Most of the majority of the stories in the Bible is about brain development, how we're supposed to develop the brain. From the Old Testament to the New Testament, Jesus was a depiction of how of the design of the brain, that this is what we're supposed to end up. If we develop it properly, Jesus' performance, the emotions that he wants us to use, this is what we're supposed to do. This is the evolution of the brain. This is the ultimate survival, how the design of the brain, how it's supposed to evolve to this stage, and Jesus was a representation of that.
So let's transition into the so tree of knowledge. That's stuff we talked about in previous episodes.
Right.
So we don't want to go down on a tangent on that. However, you wanted to talk more about, in the Bible they talk about the first land of milk and honey, and that's where we're going to transition to next. And I think you thought that you're passionate about this. You thought that this was important because you felt that we need some awareness across the world, but especially here in the United States, coming up on elections. And I'm just going to say my personal take on on politics. If you were to ask me, put a gun to my head and say, vote for this person or that person, I'd say pull the trigger. I don't think we're in much control of who comes into power. That's just my take. So I'm open to this, but why did you feel it's important to come into some of this information on the land of milk and honey, and in the Bible and the Old Testament, what God says about Israel, and how the number 3 comes into that equation, and why we should pay attention to it, if it is indeed a prophecy for what's going to happen?
Yeah. One of the things I discovered while doing research in the book was that the oldest DNA that was found in Native American was a Polynesian DNA, 17,000 years ago. So what that became very important to me then, that we look more, get this information out to the community, let them review it properly, get some experts to it, and see how they feel. Because this land is a Polynesian land. It's one of those.
So let's back up real quick. Where did you've brought this up before? Where did they find this person in the States? Right?
Yeah.
Where at?
It's the Black. He's from the Blackfeet tribe, Idaho, I believe, or Montana.
Yeah,
Montana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was Polynesian DNA found in that.
The oldest DNA found in American native so far, 17,000 years ago, is from the Polynesian DNA.
Well, I think that's why we're going to end up finding out that our history is not what we think it is. And
Right,
you're seeing a
exactly.
lot of it on, like Graham Hancock does some great stuff on ancient civilizations. I think our history is going to be rewritten as more of this stuff is found
Yeah.
out about. And it's crazy because even in things like archaeology, the ego gets involved and then the truth is hidden.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, and it can't be that way because that's not how I originally wrote it and I don't want to look bad. So Polynesian, which is essentially your ancestors.
Right.
Yeah. So you had a passion for that to come out and look at, okay, what's the true history here of this planet in general? So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay, so that's why it was important. It became very important to me, but for some reason, what opened up the conversation first for me, why I included in the book, was a question about who, when God assigned Israel as his tribe of priests, who were they supposed to be priests to? Were they supposed to be priests to one another, or they were supposed to be priests to the world? Was their job was to bring God to the world, or they just supposed to be like discussing God amongst themselves and leave it at that? Today, the Jews still believe the Israelites and the Jews still believe that God is their God. There's nobody else God. Only them know God. So unless one of the mistakes, they don't see the clues that were laid out for them, and they were very, very simple. And that opened the conversation up was, who were they supposed to be priests to? If they were supposed to be priests to one another, then they're not supposed to be out here in the world. They're supposed to be on that land. But that's not what happened. God kicked them off the land. Not once. This is where the magnificence of three was involved in this thing, because God kicked them off the land not once, not twice, but 3 times. They were enslaved by outsiders and took them off the land and burned Jerusalem twice. So this is really important. And the reason why I'm arguing in the book is that the reason why God did this because they were supposed to be priests to the world. And that is laid out in Leviticus 26. They were supposed to be priests to the world. So even today, well, we'll get into it a little bit later, but that's the question that opened up why they were supposed to be there. And then you go in Leviticus 26, laid out the reason why God said Leviticus 26 was recorded before Israel got to the land. For some reason, God knew what was coming to them and laid it out in Leviticus 26 that eventually God knew that eventually you're going to worship idols, and God laid out that foundation for them in the Ten Commandments. That once you worship idol, I'm going to kick you off the land. And that's exactly, the land's going to rest without you. So that was how one of the things that predicted what was to come for Israel regarding the land. But the second question was this. I asked was the difference between a covenant and the Ten Commandments. In a covenant, if you read through Exodus, and God had told them, Israel, to go take his land, but you take it by force. You take it with blood. And then this is the covenant between Abraham and God and Abraham. And then God issued the Ten Commandments. God forbade exactly what he told Abraham to do and his descendants, that to take his land by force. So this is a contradiction right here. So the question is why this is an obvious contradiction. This is what a lot of people complain about, that this God was violent and this and that. And then come Leviticus 26. Leviticus 26 set conditions on keeping the land. You have to do this, you have to perform this. What God said in the commandments is, do not worship idols. I am your God. Do not worship idols. And then Leviticus 26, God set that condition in Israel. For you to keep the land, do not worship idols. Once you worship idols, I'm kicking you off the land. See, people don't talk about this stuff because they don't see I don't know if they don't understand it or they ignore it. But the difference between the Ten Commandments and the covenant was that the covenant was a contract. The Ten Commandments is a law. So I'm arguing in the book that the Ten Commandments is like a constitution of a country. The covenant is just like a contract. So what controls what? The Constitution controls the contract. Constitution, the Ten Commandments as a constitution set up the conditions for Israel in keeping the land. And once you violate those conditions, the covenant is broken, because the contract can be broken once you don't perform on those satisfied conditions set up for you to perform. So that's one of the questions you open up the conversation about the land. These are the two questions that I asked, and then things kind of fell into place and opened up for me.
So, because Leviticus, if you go through it, and once again, I don't know the Bible real well, but I did read some of it as you were talking about, hey, go check out this scripture. Leviticus is pretty hardcore. It's pretty medieval. Some of the stuff, it's very strong language, a lot of God-fear talk.
Right.
And so you're saying that there's some contradiction on whether or not God was one to be feared or one to be a loving God in that scenario? Is that the contradiction you're talking about?
No, the contradiction was how the covenant and the Ten Commandments. The covenant contradicts the Ten Commandments. You see, God had told Israel, "You take this land. This land already
take
belongs
it
to
by
people.
force, but then
Take it by
do
force."
not kill your neighbor.
Yeah, but then come the Ten Commandments, and the second most important commandment is do not kill, do not steal from your neighbors. So what is this? What does this mean? And then Leviticus 26 comes in and say, this is what happens. You know, if you worship idol, I'm going to take the land from you. So God set the conditions for them. And that's what the confusing thing is for me was God has set these conditions before Israel got to the land. Before Israel. So God already knew what was going to come. It's almost like God already pre-planned the outcome for Israel, how Israel is going to go about performing their task as priests. So they kicked him off the land 3 times. The magnificent 3. It happened 3 times, and that was it. If it happened 3 times, that's it. It was not going to happen no more. So because they were not supposed to be on that land, even today.
So, and you'd also, going back to the magnificence of the 3, so going back to the number 3, you were talking about one group representing the negative and one group representing the positive.
That's one of the things that also everybody miss is because Israel was designed, the structure was designed by God personally, they had to be structured as a magnificent of the 3. All fundamental elements of the universe is structured in 3. The atom was the basic, was the first element. It was structured in 3. The water itself, one of the scientists call it the water of life. It also has only three atoms. So all these little things, that include Israel. The land as well, there's going to be 3 land of milk. We'll explain that a little bit more later. But Israel was designed as a magnificent of the 3. It means there's a positive and a negative. And this showed up at the first incident when they came out of slavery, the day that that God issued drafted up the 10 Commandments. One tribe of Israel that was down the Mount Sinai, grafted up the golden calf, the idol. So this was the first incident that represented that God showed us of who Israel was. So when Moses came down, he ordered the other half of the other tribe of Israel, the Levites, to slaughter this guy. So here, God showed Israel with 2 tribes. There's a negative and a positive Israel. So this continues later on down the line. Israel again divided itself into 2 groups. There was the northern tribes of Israel and the southern tribes of Israel, and they got into a civil war. And that's when, after this civil war, God kicked them out of the land. First, the Assyrians came in and took the northern tribes. That's the first time. The second time, the Babylonians came in, took the rest of Israel off the promised land, and burned Jerusalem to the ground. So this was the second time. The 2 times that God kicked Israel off the land, but when they divided themselves into north and southern tribes, this is a continuation, another planet. God planted the evidence of Israel as a fundamental element of the design. So today, people don't realize, they don't teach the Christians, this thing, that there are 2 Israel today. There's a Zionist Israel and the diaspora Jews. Again, the fundamental element still continues today of the design because they had to be in 2 different groups. They had to be divided. There's always to be a negative side of Israel and a positive side of Israel. Today, diaspora Jews call the Zionists evil people. They don't want to go to that land. They have nothing to do with the land. The diaspora Jews believe they follow Leviticus 26. They're supposed to be, they're not supposed to return to that land. So those are things that they don't teach the church. They don't. The pastors and the church don't teach the community.
And so that's not inherently good or bad. What you're explaining is that is the structure of the universe. It's the structure of the atom. Is positive, negative. That electron that creeps around, that has that negative force, keeps the actual atom or the element intact. And we
Right.
talked about electron capture and how that electron every once in a while falls into that and the element actually transforms into a different element.
Right.
And by the way, going back to water real quick, I don't know if you've ever, this is a side note, but I thought it was interesting because you mentioned water. I believe it was Dr. Masaru Emoto, a Japanese physicist, did a study on water where he would actually have the water crystallized depending on what you were saying or the music you were playing. So if you were saying "I love you," for example, over and over to the water, it materialized into this beautiful like snowflake. If you were saying "I hate you," you take a look at these pictures online; it's insane. And if you say "I hate you" over and over, it will just crystallize. Not even really crystallize, just kind of morph into this kind of black blob of a cloud. Same thing with music. If you start playing classical music, you get a formation of this beautiful geometric pattern. You start playing heavy metal, and it just distorts it into just kind of a non-geometrical, if that's the way you can explain it. So it's crazy because the argument is that, and they've proven this in science, that water holds memory. And so a lot of this just ties together that there's so much more to this world that we don't understand.
Right.
And I think the whole point that a lot of the things we'll be talking about is to live a more fulfilled life, to live as a whole self and have one foot in that spirit world of the things that we don't understand, because it makes this life a whole lot more interesting. Our story in general of meeting each other and going on this journey. I mean, if we didn't have an outlook of magical things happen and miracles happen, this probably wouldn't have happened, because I think what you project out is what you get. So that's a side note, but I think it ties everything together, that there is more to this universe and this material world than we understand. And the way that you explain how the magnificence of the three comes in, maybe just a certain perspective that explains why things are the way they are because of this consistency of these numbers within the Bible.
Right. Water is magical. You know, as I explain in the book, as I claim in the book, water is the only thing God did not say He created. He created everything else except this water. This is why, but it was there for a reason.
Well, you say that because in Genesis it says something about the water already being there, right?
Right. When in Genesis 1, say God said He created the universe, heavens and earth. And then on the second chapter, he floated in, and He was floating on top of the water. So the water was already there. He didn't specifically say He created this water. He just said He was floating on top of the waters. And then He moves on and start creating. And then God for the light. We was after the waters, but the waters was already there. Anyways.
So that's interesting. That's go ahead.
So we go, and the reason why I'm claiming that American land, let me explain it properly. One of the claims that I'm saying is that God replaced the land that was once given to Israel, and replaced it with a new land. The new promised land was for the Gentiles, and that land is this land, the American lands. So let's
explain Gentiles for the users. Gentiles, non-Jewish people, correct?
Non-Jewish people. Yeah. Everyone. If you don't have if you're not tied to Abraham,
I mean, that's by
Gentile.
definition. That has nothing to do with
Right.
race, culture. That's by definition.
If you don't have Abraham's bloodline, you're a Gentile. So when God returned and included the Gentiles as priests, reassigned the task of priesthood to Gentiles, allowed the Gentiles to be part of this task. It came with the land, and that land is American land. So, and then I got all the evidence laid out. You know, there's a lot of it. If you're interested in this thing, with elections coming up, grab a copy of this book so you can understand more. You know, you hear people say that this land is a Christian land, and that's because the forefathers were all Christians, but they have little understanding of how this nation was formed under God's plan. It was spiritually, what you call a spiritually inspired declaration. So let me read you guys the first why I believe the blessing was the first marker God left here of how He changed this land, how he changed the blessings from the land that was once given to Israel to the American lands. And this came in the Declaration of Independence. Can you read it for me?
Which one? Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That there, I'm claiming, is a political translation of the second most important command. And the reason why I'm saying this is because you cannot love your neighbor, you cannot love anybody else if you think they're below you. They think they're not better, they're not no better than you. So you will never treat those people as equal as yourself. So this is why this is really important, because this is a political translation of the second most important command. You can only love your neighbor if you look at them as you look at yourself, as you love yourself. So this was the first marker that was God left of why this nation was chosen. It was the second land, was the second promised land He assigned to the Gentiles. And if you notice, here's the magnificence of the three. There are only three rights included in this declaration: the right to life, to liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Only three. So this is what you call another explanation of a marker of the magnificence of the three that fell out of the Bible and landed here on earth.
And Thomas Jefferson was the third president.
And the guy that just by coincidence, the guy that introduced this into the Constitution became the third president of the United States. So this is and then one of the most important marker was that this country was the only country that defended the second most important command and defended it by blood. And that came through the Civil War. The Civil War began with slavery, anti-slavery, and pro-slavery crowd got into it, and it was behind. And this was the motto of this Civil War was slavery, was how people treated one another. Not unlike what the Christians should be treating each other, but they were enslaving people, and it just happened to be so. When the Civil War came about as a result of this. So the Americans became the only nation on earth to defend the second most important command, and we know what happened after that Civil War. The milk of honey. Everything began. The United States became the center of the universe, pretty much. At least on Earth,
with the Industrial Revolution, and because when you say milk and honey, that's out of the Bible, and doing some research on it, it's essentially a very fertile land.
That's what it is
by definition. So you're claiming now that the United States is the land of milk and honey. You also had mentioned, I'm going through the notes, you wanted to discuss how the creation of the atom bomb was confirmation that
right.
The American land was replaced by the old one. Given to Israel.
That was a confirmation for me, was because my claim is the atom bomb was designed from the atom, and this was the manifestation of the Ark of the Covenant from the Bible. But we know that God personally designed the Ark of the Covenant. So if the atom bomb was a manifestation of the Ark of the Covenant, it could not be. There is absolutely no way, Americans could do it without approval from God. And the most amazing thing about this is the people who created this bomb were all Jews. The three people that started this whole process were Jews. So and that's just just add more evidence to support my claim that the atom bomb was a manifestation of the Ark. And there's absolutely no way the United States could have created this thing without approval, because this is God's artifact, and he designed it personally from his hand.
Okay, so the last part you wanted to go into, because we're going to be running up on time here. So you were talking about the danger posed on Americans. I don't like to think in terms of negativity. I think when you look for it, that's what you get. But as we're going through some of the statements in the Declaration of Independence, it's like we pretty much are the antithesis of unity and integration here. We have two parties, and the two parties absolutely seem to hate each other, and will find every single way to attack. Just the same thing, really, that's going on in the Middle East. It's just here domestically. So what's your take on the danger on Americans coming into election time here? This is just your take, remember?
Yeah, this is just my take, but it's important for the Christians to understand this, because most of these wars in the Middle East are actually pushed by Christians. That's how I see it. They're trying to bring the end of civilization. They're trying to start a nuclear war because they want to prove that the Bible that God is real by killing everybody. This is why people, the kids have turned away from the church. The church are closing, and because people don't believe in this stuff anymore, because they don't believe in God because of what they're doing today, what they've been doing for the last 20, 30 years of trying to end civilization just to prove their point that that the book of Revelation is what's in Revelation is real, without even telling people that the devil is not pushing the issue; it's them. They are the ones pushing the issue. There's no devil, but the people who are trying to do this. So what I need the Americans to understand, first and foremost, that the tree of life is the Ten Commandments. God left clues in the Bible of what the tree of life is, and I'm claiming that the tree of life is the Ten Commandments. You have to follow this thing to the T. You have to follow. When God said that you have to love, the second most important command is love your neighbor like you love yourself. That's actually now proven, neurologically proven by our experts, that how important it is. Loving thy neighbor is important socially because it affects the development of the human brain. So do the Americans, as they get ready for elections, you have to bear that in mind. The thing is that I'm concerned about, because if my claim is true, that this is the second land of milk and honey, that means there's going to be a third one. It's because it's mandatory to be in the magnificent of the three. There has to be a third land, because everything God touches is done in three, and there's going to be a third one. The world is changing really fast. We have AI now who's about to replace millions of jobs, but you don't hear politicians talk about it. We have a new organization in the world. They're forming their own dollar, and that's going to affect our welfare, our well-being. And that's the violence that's going on in the Middle East today. The incessant, like without conscience, they're dropping and killing babies, and to keep this land. God already kicked Israel off the land 3 times. It's in the scripture. Leviticus 26 says, when you do this, you're off the land. It means you're off the land forever. You're going to be my people. There's only one condition that was God kept in the covenant, as in Leviticus 26. The diaspora Jews know this and follow it, and they're following it today. You're going to be my people. Wherever you're going to be in your enemy land, you're going to be my people. That's part of the covenant that God didn't say he'll never break that. But the land, he could break, because he put conditions on that land on how to keep it, and then they didn't follow through. So that's how important it is, this upcoming election. And we'll talk more about it. We're going to use scriptures in the next 4 or 5 shows just to show you the things that they don't teach you in church. But finding the Ark of the Covenant, finding the tree of knowledge, the tree of life, and the Garden of Eden. Those are really, really important understanding of how God set up the scriptures. I know some of the Jews are listening. If you come to listen to this show, you're gonna, just like a lot of them on groups that I'm on, they condemn me for talking about the Torah. They say only they know the Torah. So my counter to them is, God did not show you what the Ark of the Covenant is. He took the Ark of the Covenant from you guys and never showed you. I was just playing with them, and they get mad. But these things are real. They are factual. To the Christians, these things are real. God, I know you guys claim that you love Jesus. Jesus is going to save you. Jesus is not going to save you for the things that you're doing today. And if you go by the magnificence of the three structure and the design, God's going to move that blessing from this land. And that's what you should be concerned about. You're talking about civil war today. I mean, these are the Christians talking about civil war. They want to break the country. You have to install somebody there, and that's a horrible thing on how you teach your kids. So, what to teach about Jesus and the church.
You and I had talked on the way over here, and it's funny when you start looking at some of this stuff online, and you start just glancing through the comments. It's somewhat disgusting, but I don't want to label anybody. It wouldn't make me any better. But some of these comments, as soon as you start getting in discussions about politics, God, organized religion, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, it doesn't matter. You start getting these people get offended. People get offended way too easily. I joke around with you. It's like, I think my comeback is, I'm offended, you're offended. Like, there's no reason to be offended with what we're talking about here. This is just a different perspective. However, even to the point where, what if Jesus didn't exist? Which a lot of people, Jesus never existed. I don't think that's the point. The point is, are you following the message? Are you trying to follow and live in the way of Jesus, whether or not that was a real person or not? That part becomes irrelevant, but everybody argues over that instead. But they're missing the core message, right? So, what else did you want to wrap up with before we got to wrap
Yeah,
up here?
yeah, yeah. The message is nobody follows. The message is there, but nobody. The reason why a lot of people are anti-Christians today is the churches are closing. That's because of the violence. The church is a very, very violent institution. We know this. Today, people still ignore it, but the facts are laid out here on right here on live TV. A congressman talks about he was questioning a professor about a protest against the war going on in Israel with Israel and the Palestinians, and this guy is talking about, you're not going to take my blessings from me by condemning Israel. What he's saying is that by supporting the killing of these kids, the Palestinian kids, America's going to get blessed by God for that. I mean, haven't you read haven't you read the Ten Commandments? And that's the kind of thing that the kids don't avoid churches. They laugh, they question you about God, and they make fun of God. And that's because of this. This guy is a leader of a country talking about killing people will bring blessings. That's not what Jesus is about. That's not the message at all. So we gotta stop. I'm kidding.
You're getting fired
Got
up.
fired up. We're getting all wired up.
It's all good, man. So, well, let's wrap it up there. But and we'll cover more of this in future episodes, because this stuff is pretty hardcore, some of the topic, and it's controversial, and that's fine. It's just let's have a discussion about it. And there are a lot of great points you make as far as the coincidence or perceived coincidence of all these numbers in the Bible. When it's all said and done, I think we sit back and go, which side are we going to take? Are we going to take the side of a polarity of negativity or positivity? And that means that, are we going to decide to treat others the way that they would like to treat themselves, or the way that we would like to be treated? Or are we going to continue to point fingers? Because none of this is going to change unless people change themselves internally. Instead of playing the blame game, pointing your fingers at each other over and over again. Same thing that's going on in the Middle East. I attack you, then I'm expected that you're going to attack me, and we'll just go ahead and play ping pong back and forth until we destroy each other. Until people change themselves on the inside, none of this is going to change. And you have a choice. You can either choose to think in a positive direction or a negative direction. And if you choose the positive side or the negative side, it doesn't matter. But if you choose the path of positivity, which I believe is the easier path to go in life, with just being blessed, feeling gratitude, understanding, allowing other people to be themselves and being your true self, share your unique gifts with the world, and live that way instead of all of this pointing of the fingers and separation, you'll find that your particular reality, and we'll go into some quantum-based physics where it's been proven that, particles that are long distances away are affected when another particle is expressing a certain behavior. This is going to be something that you have to start thinking about with the structure of the reality we live in, which is, if you're going down a state of, you know what, I'm going to change the way I look at things in the world, and I'm going to see them the way that I want to perceive them, your reality starts changing. So if you start going down this path of viewing this world in more of a positive light, there's a good chance that you're going to see some of this negativity in your particular reality fade out, and you shift into a parallel version of the earth. That's going to sound crazy to some people, but we're finding out more and more that this is the way that the structure of reality works. Right. You have that choice. Are you going to go in the positive direction, or are you going to go in the state of negative and separation? All right. So let's go ahead and you can take us out with a quick prayer, and we'll wrap up, my man.
Thank you for joining us. My apologies if we are saying anything that's offends you. All we're doing is giving the information, passing the information that you may decide of, because the world, we need to improve this world. I'm 64 years old. Ever since I grew up, that's all I see is a restless world, a violent world. Man, we have to end this somehow, some way. We have to figure it out. But listen to the conversation that we have, read the book, and see what you can pull out of there. See if you can do something to improve the situation. Take it one person at a time, it will be okay, I believe. So with that, thank you, God, for another blessing. Thank you for your Spirit being here with us today. We can ask for your Spirit to lead us and protect us and protect this nation and forgive its collective sins. so we can rebuild. We're here to bring out information as you showed us to share with the community. So ask for your blessings for this nation overall. Thank you again for all that you've done for us. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. When you serve yourself, you serve others. Scratch that. Go ahead and end that. Scratch that last part. Not paying. I was getting hacked on my phone. I'm trying to change passwords and stuff. Yeah, that last part where I go, just wrap up with his prayer if you can edit that out. Yeah, I said it wrong.